Hello everyone. This podcast is brought to you by the Chartered Institute of Building, also known as CIOB, the world's largest and most influential professional body for construction management and leadership around the world. We have approximately 50,000 members in more than 100 countries. Our members, past and present, have had a hand in executing many groundbreaking construction projects across the world, from the Houses of Parliament in London to the Sydney Opera House, through to venues for Beijing and London Olympics. Chartered membership provides you with the recognition of your abilities, knowledge and expertise within the industry, creating more exciting career opportunities. Don't forget to become a student member for free today.
Welcome everyone to our interview episode of Emerging Exemplars. I'm your host, Daisy Wu, the podcast lead representing the student, graduate and young professionals community within the Chartered Institute of Building Oceania chapter. It's my big pleasure to channel this interview with my fellow committee, Ethan Jones.
Hi everyone, I'm Ethan Jones. I'm currently living in Melbourne, serving on the Novus Tomorrow's Leaders Committee with Daisy as well. I've lived in Melbourne since January this year. Previously I was in Tassie. I was working for a residential builder. This year I've taken up a graduate role with a tier 1 commercial builder, currently working on site on a $20 million office refurb. I'm also a associate member of the Australian Institute of Building, a Victorian chapter, and was previously involved with the Tasmanian chapter of the Australian Institute of Building. I completed my master's last year online via Deakin University, and before that, 5 years ago, I studied a Bachelor of Architecture at University of Tasmania. I would like to welcome all the listeners to Conversations with Construction Connoisseurs, the show that aims to advance construction management education and give access to the knowledge that you're to young students and professionals that it can be shared with and added on to. Listen to our thoughts on leading issues with the industry. As the Chartered Institute of Building Student Division, we have vested interest in nurturing the budding leaders of tomorrow. And this is what this series is all about, by taking you through the journey of rising stars in our community who lead by example. Would like to welcome our guest tonight, which is Kevin Kalip.
Thanks, Daisy and Ethan. So I'm pleased to be on this episode of the podcast today. To introduce myself, I'm Kevin. I'm a soon-to-be graduate of the Master of Construction Management at the University of Melbourne. So aside from that, I'm also a former CSA president. The CSA, of course, is the Construction Student Association at the University of Melbourne, and a former student leader in other organizations at the university. Hopefully today I can share some of my experiences in student organizations and some of my insights into how you can utilize these student experiences to give you an advantage when job hunting or even just in your day-to-day job or your career. A bit of about myself in my career now, in my position. I'm currently an assistant project manager at Knight Frank in Indonesia. I've been in this position since the beginning of the year. And right now I'm just managing things here. So it's good.
Thank you very much, Kevin. We're really thrilled to kick off the production with you for what will be a very phenomenal episode and interview to enlighten our audience. But before we kick off and focus discussion around a plethora of themes, could you please respond to some icebreaking questions just so that the audience can get to know you more as a person?
Sure, Daisy. Let's go.
There you go. So what's your go-to song and book that you can at times fall back on when things get quite hard or you have to grind through things at crunch times?
So maybe beginning with song. I'm a big fan of a local band called the Paper Kites. They were first formed in St. Kilda. So that's kind of my go-to band. Revelator Eyes from them is my go-to from the band. Although when you need the motivation through a tough workout or just to hype you up to get some work done, some EDM and hardstyle is probably the way to go. So for the book, one book that I recently finished was The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. He's one of the kind of like thought leaders on leadership thinking and organizational leadership. So it's a great read to transform how you think and to guide yourself to act more sustainably and focus on the big picture and focus on how you can effectively lead organizations. Another book by Simon Sinek is Leaders Eat Last that complements it quite nicely. Yeah.
That's brilliant. And other than that, what do you do in your leisure time to wind down?
I'm a big fan of tennis now. I don't know if it would be to wind down because I often get winded up because of tennis, getting frustrated. Picked it up about a year ago, and interestingly, I find that it's a sport where you're kind of competing against the opponent as much as you are competing against yourself. Very frustrating and rewarding at the same time. So definitely something I would recommend you guys try.
So excellent. Now, Kevin, let's take a glance into your student career at the University of Melbourne in Australia. So whilst being your classmate from day one, I still would love to ask a question on behalf of the global audience. Why did you opt for your field of study, and why specifically did you take on the Master of Construction Management currently at the University of Melbourne?
Thanks, Stacey. The decision to take on construction came very accidentally. So I was a property major back in my bachelor's, and the way the university structured the course was that you needed to have all the subjects for your major, as well as electives and breadths on the to fill in, your course points. So after looking through some options, there was like architecture, urban planning, engineering. I chose to enroll in some construction subjects, and one after another, it did turn into me having a construction minor from my bachelor's. So of course, a big thanks would also be to the support of a small group of friends who I stayed with from the first to last semester, in which actually Daisy was one of these people to kind of, spur my interest in this major, in this field. As for why I chose to enroll in the master's program, was actually because of some feedback I had from my old boss at this developer I had worked in towards the end of my bachelor's degree. He had asked, what are you doing after your graduation? And I said, probably work for you, because, that's what you do when you graduate. But he did mention, a lot of people in the industry took on a master's degree, and a few of my friends are taking master's degree as well. And it wasn't sort of a thing where I kind of just jumped on the bandwagon, but with COVID coming in as well, this was the start of the COVID pandemic, by the way, in January of 2020. Yeah, 2020. It seemed like something good to do to wait out the pandemic, and things that you do to enrich yourself never hurts.
Yep, that's excellent. And thank you again for your humbling comments on me in my capacity as a classmate. And I guess what you said was really brilliant in terms of how construction and property may intertwine as a major or just two quite congruent field of study. Recalling that we both sort of studied the uni with an agenda sketched out to potentially accomplish double majors, although we both sort of ended up with a minor and major, but we ended up still now in the same course, so that's quite excellent. And would you mind sharing a bit more light on how they've really panned out in terms of being supplementary from an academic and professional standpoint?
Of course, for the viewers of this podcast, probably you know something a bit of construction. Obviously, you know that property, construction, architecture, urban planning, engineering are all related in that, at the end of the day, we're working on the same project, just different stakeholders of the same project. At the end of the day, we're all different stakeholders working on the same project, from the architects to the project managers, the engineers, the urban planners. So at the end of the day, it's all very complementary. And in the work I do, a lot of the things that I do are not even related to construction. I do a mix of property related things and also construction.
So obviously you're from Indonesia, but you made a decision to come to Melbourne to study. What was the sort of reason behind that?
Well, choosing Australia, Melbourne particularly, was a different option from everyone I had gone to high school with. Everyone in high school was going to US, UK, Canada, that kind of thing. So after carefully weighing the options, I felt that the lifestyle in Melbourne suited me best, and that putting yourself in a different environment, even though you don't have any connections with the so very few people I knew in the city, can be the thing that helps you flourish at the end of the day. Yeah. So having a different selection, is good sometimes.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. I did something similar myself moving to Melbourne this year. I only had a few connections and a very small amount of family, but I think that, sort of taking a jump into the deep end, so to say, it definitely pushes you outside of your comfort zone and it pushes you more to achieve better results.
Yeah, and living by yourself is probably like 30% of what you learn as well, moving out of your home, I guess.
It's a big change.
Yeah.
So which aspects of Australian culture and life did you love the most, particularly in Melbourne? It's obviously a very multicultural city.
So because of the pandemic, I actually moved back to Indonesia last July. And the thing I miss the most, and which I only think that people from Indonesia can relate with, is being able to breathe fresh air, walk on the street, not having any traffic, and having my friends stay around the block. But again, in Melbourne, the cost of eating out was not the cheapest.
I agree with you there.
So just curious, Kevin, I know that you attended international high school that was British. So how did you find yourself transitioning to another Western society? I imagine that would be quite different compared to my experience transitioning from a quite traditional Asian or Chinese upbringing to Western.
I think it got to do with, at the end of the day, my high school and my university teaching style. The teaching style that I experienced in high school and university is very similar. I took this program called 𝐼B. I don't really know how to pronounce it. It's like International Baccalaureate. I think that's how it's pronounced. And they did a lot of coursework, lots of presentations, lots of reports. So transitioning for me, I was lucky that it wasn't too difficult.
So Kevin, obviously we've touched on that you're living in Indonesia and currently completing your master's through University of Melbourne online. I did something very similar, but obviously that was only from one state over to Victoria from Tasmania, let alone I can't imagine how interesting and difficult it could be at different points of time doing internationally. How are you going with all that?
Oh, that's right, Ethan. I'm doing my course right now in Indonesia. It's a 3-hour time difference. It can be 4 hours depending on daylight savings. So the challenges are twofold with this. As firstly, classes now start around 5 a.m., which is the same for some of my friends in China and India as well. So that's something that we're experiencing right now. Obviously, that's no easy feat for me, who is used to going to class at 4 p.m., 5 p.m. It's nice you can sleep in until 11 and then not go to class until 5. That's good. Not a fan of that. But perhaps the most major thing is not being able to go for site visits and inspections, and not having the same experiences as my peers in Melbourne. So even though they are doing it online as well, they can go on site, they can do site visits when the lockdown lifts. I'm sure a lot of students abroad now feel the same way. It's not what a uni program should be, but just understanding that it's the best we can do during a global pandemic. It does put things into perspective, and you still feel lucky to be able to do a master's at this time. In terms of how I overcame these challenges, I'm a morning person now. I didn't used to be, but 5 a.m. mornings are now very common in my week. And likewise, when you work in the construction industry, I guess you would have to be used to 6 a.m. site meetings, working at odd hours. It's the necessity for us to adapt, which I feel I've been able to do. But in addition to this, being able to still have meaningful interactions and create relationships online has made a whole world of difference for me. In a Zoom call where everyone is silent, you have to be that person brave enough to break the silence and create some conversation, even if you become known as that guy.
That's good. You've done very well. How are you going? Obviously, I've helped manage groups, obviously interstate, but I imagine even with the time difference, it particularly gets hard trying to manage group assignments and the like. How do you go with those?
Oh, I think the biggest challenge would just be to set a time for group meetings. At the end of the day, I just work with what's best with everyone. If it means 4 a.m. meeting, then it means 4 a.m. meeting. But you get the work done, however possible at the end of the day. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really terrific to hear, Kevin. I'm sure you've been quite doing well, not necessarily breezing everything through, but you surely have the aptitude and capacity to overcome all the odds, which I have no doubt about. Yeah, so on the back of adaptation and independence that really underpin our life as especially international students in Australia, let alone even currently in the university and a young professional navigating this pandemic. How did you see your previous experience of transitioning into life in another country aid you and help you develop the muscle and exercise that in adapting to the current new normal?
Being able to adapt is probably one of the things that you need to learn in the workplace. Now that we've moved to the new normal, where everyone's working from home, you still have to interact with your team, even if you can't see them physically. And you still need to have an understanding of the project, even though if you can't visit the site. I guess that's something you do learn in university. One, being able to, and especially nowadays where everyone's doing online courses, is online meetings, being able to engage with your peers online, and still having an understanding of the site, even if you're not being able to attend. Other than that, what I learned from my university days is that you just need to juggle. You have to juggle a lot of things, manage your time wisely. When I was back in university, I was doing my uni. I was working part-time and I was working in student groups as well. So having that experience of having lots of things on my plate helps me today.
It's not just a plate, it's a palette of all amazing development opportunities, as I would look at this way. I'm sure you'll elaborate generously on how you enjoy them and grow through them later on as we evolve the conversation. So just to wrap up this part of the discussion, what would be your number one advice to your peers who are in the same boat and who are probably at the periphery of transitioning into new opportunities?
Look, for my advice to my peers is just be grateful for what you have right now. A lot of people overseas in, especially developing countries, don't have the opportunity to study during a global pandemic. A lot of girls in Indonesia had to leave schooling so they can support their family. Girls always alike. So now that you have the opportunity to study during a pandemic, appreciate it, do your best, and don't be like me. I used to complain a lot when I had to study hard, but realize that being under pressure is a privilege.
So Kevin, you've been a member and active contributor to quite a few student organisations within the University of Melbourne. Would you like to just give us a bit of a brief rundown of a couple of organisations you've been with?
Sure. I'll just list them down because I think over the years it has been quite a bit. So during the first year of my bachelor's, I became the cultural and social director for this student group called the University of Melbourne Student Union International Department. So it's UMSU International. So they were the largest international student union in Australia at the time. So during the first term I was there, I was the cultural and social director. The second term I was there, I was a treasurer. So after those 2 terms, I was pitched, or rather not pitched, poached to become a project director for the ASEAN Youth Organization as a project director for one of their events. So the cool thing about that event was that it was not just run by the AYO, the ASEAN Youth Organization. It was run by many different organizations working in Melbourne, say like the Malaysian student organization, the Singapore, the Burmese, Filipino, and Indonesian as well. So it was a whole heap of organizations working together to come up with an event, and I was poached to be the project director of that event. So it was called the ASEAN Gala. So I did that for about 6 months. And after that, when the pandemic hit, I was lucky enough to join the elections for the Construction Student Association, and lucky enough to win as president of the CSA. So after I stepped down in mid-August, I decided that it was a good break from all the student organizations, and I'm just going to focus on work in uni now.
That's quite a list of achievements. So you've done very well, a very active member contributing to a very different range of areas. How do you feel these have also then assisted you in sort of everyday life and in your current role? Obviously, you mentioned a treasury role, which is always very important because everything does come down to dollars and cents a lot of the time. And also then as far as project director, you've obviously had a chance to help organise some fairly large events, which sometimes events can almost be like construction to a certain degree, or property within a certain degree, with the number of external and internal stakeholders involved and actively negotiating between different parties.
Yeah. So maybe I'll start in the beginning as my project director role. So maybe from that, it's just very similar to running projects in the construction industry, the project management industry. Likewise, you have a scope, you have a budget, you have stakeholders, and you need to please, certain outcomes. You need to obtain certain outcomes. That's kind of the similar things you have, regardless of what type of project you have. Whether it be marketing or application or construction or building. So understanding how to start a project and bring it all the way from A to Z, to kind of organize the project team, knowing what needs to be accomplished, and knowing your kind of limitations in terms of budget, in terms of time frame. That's what I learned and what I applied in work. What I learned from the treasury role is the Excel skills. Knowing how to use Excel without the mouse, that's pretty cool. And also just, keeping your budget intact and making sure that, it all kind of ties into that cost management role and kind of like estimator, that kind of thing. So that's what I feel I brought over to my career.
Yeah, that's tremendous, Kevin. As I was watching an exemplary leader sharing his journey and how he had developed and learned over these years, I couldn't help actually reminiscing the day when I was interviewed by you in your capacity as a project director in year 1. I was being interviewed by you for a general volunteering role in the international department to serve a broader community, and that definitely played an instrumental role in my transition experience in the university as a fresher. Needless to mention how paths cross, which is like a dream and which panned out like a dream later on in the years that followed, all the way till you became my successor and took the helm from me to manage the Construction Students Association and value to the broader construction and property cohorts. And it's even more remarkable imagining that was the decision that you made to leap into this opportunity and took on the responsibility after COVID landed and perpetuated in the Australian landscape. How did you what drove you to step up?
So if you take a look at the previous student organizations that I was a part of, it was not very industry specific. In any industries, it didn't relate to marketing, it didn't relate to economics, finance, whatever. It was just student union in general. So I felt something that I was missing was actually a contribution to the cohort of my industry, which is, you know, the construction industry, the property industry, that kind of thing. You know, so I felt that that was kind of missing in my student organization career. So I felt that the CSA was a good place to finish off, so to speak.
And you were still obviously involved with CSA as you moved back to Indonesia during the pandemic. How did you find that involvement, and how did you continue that involvement from an international location?
Yeah. So the funny thing is that actually I started and ended my term overseas. So of the, you know, the whole committee of about eight to nine people, I've only met one of them, actually. I've only met one person, which is the secretary. That's because he was in the same group of friends as me and Daisy, growing up from bachelor to master's. But everyone else, you know, I've never met in person. So we had to do things over Zoom. They themselves, due to the lockdown, has only met, you know, 3 or 4 times as well. But having good people on the ground, having good people I can trust, is probably the key to our success in that term in the CSA. Yeah, without them, I can tell you right now, you know, managing a group of, managing a team overseas, not having the opportunity to meet them in person would have been a large struggle. Even, you know, I would not have known, you know, whether we would have succeeded in that case or not. So having good people on the ground, people you can trust and have good communication, and knowing that they can deliver up to your expectations was probably the thing that allowed us to do well in our term, despite having all of these restrictions. And I think this comes down to in your career as well. You'll know that having good people around you is very important. You know, without your team, you can think, but you cannot act.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
You know, that I really feel appreciative of the 3 years that I did throughout our bachelor degree before COVID landed. That really paved a really concrete foundations for us to develop a network with classmates and fellow student leaders like you, who we can fall back on and benchmark against, all the way till we all were driven into arguably a rabbit hole, namely Zoom University, and also navigating things in the background with work and life, I guess. And on that point, I really would commend you for, I guess, your determination and vision to give back, regardless of what you had on your hand to navigate and tidy up. Well, I guess that spirit is not something that everyone has, and definitely it's not the spirit and it's not the spirit that all the leaders have.
Yeah, look, you know, like, even though we here are very young, I think you have to recognize that life is short, and, you know, you only live once, YOLO, and it's up to you how you want your life to pan out. You know, is it something, you know, do you want to do great things in your life, or would you rather just sit down, watch Netflix for your entire 20s? You know, it's a decision that you make every day, to try to do your best and to try to achieve things, you know, that out of your comfort zone. So yeah, that's something that I try to adopt to my best.
Vision without action is certainly hallucination.